to no good. We're up to 10a, towards the bottom. So just to remember, because we're going to be talking about this a lot, we had a debate, Rav Huna and Rav Chisda, one who slaughters, and now the knife is nicked. Was the nick on the skin before it got to the pipes, or was it nicked on a bone afterwards? Rav Huna says, even if the guy was breaking bones with this knife all day long, we assume that it was nicked by the skin, and therefore the slaughtering is no good. That's Rav Huna. And Rav Chisda said it's good because it was nicked by you could assume that it was nicked by the bone. How does the skin nick the knife?
Yeah, how does the skin nick the knife?
How does the skin nick the knife? It nicks it. You know, if you were a slaughterer, you would know. I don't know. So, okay, we explained that. Rav Huna explained his reasoning that until you have a valid slaughtering, we're going to assume its previous status, that it's not valid. And Rav Chisda explained his reasoning that the animal is good and the knife is not good, but the animal is good. So until you find me a problem with the animal, we're not going to remove the animal from its kosher status. Now, Meisvei, you have the esophagus and you have the windpipe. Esophagus carries the food. The windpipe helps you breathe. Well, it helps you. It lets you. The windpipe. So Meisvei, shacharas havesha. This is talking about a bird now, where all you have to have is one stem and one pipe cut. So you cut through the esophagus, shacharas havesha. The achar kach nishmita hagargeris. Then you find that the windpipe is out of place. It's detached from the jaw. Detached from the jaw. I can't use that accent so well. Yeah, hagargeris. Yeah, that's they tell your kids in South Africa if you don't behave, detach you from your jaw. Okay, so nishmata hagargeris, sheira is good. Okay, what if you go the other way though? Nishmata hagargeris. You find the windpipe detached from its jaw. The acharkach shakras aveshet, and then you shack through the esophagus. That's going to be psula, invalid. Okay, because the animal died when the windpipe was detached from its jaw. Shachar es aveshet, v'nimtzeis hagargeres shemuta. So you slaughtered the esophagus and you find that the windpipe is detached. But you don't know. Im kodem shchita nishmata, im la'achar shchita nishmata. There's a great case. You have an animal, you slaughtered it, and now you're not sure. Was this windpipe detached before I slaughtered, and therefore it is prohibited, the animal? Or do you assume it was detached afterwards? So, Zahaya Maisa, this story happened, v'amru, and they said about this story, kol safek b'shchita pasal. Any doubt in the shchita, any doubt is going to be invalid. So the word kol always includes kol safek la'asuyei mai. What's it coming to include? Any doubt? Is it not coming to include a case where the knife was nicked and yet it renders it invalid? That's like the opinion of Rav Huna, a proof for Rav Huna and an attack on Rav Chisda. So what's Rav Chisda going to say? Lo la'asuye safek shaha safek daras. The question was, there was a doubt in terms of, did he wait too long while he was cutting it, or did he push too hard? And that's why it's invalid. Turning the page. So now, Umay Shna, okay, but what's the difference? Umay Shna, they're both doubts. No, it's a big difference. Hasam is Yalda Bareasa Bibehema. One, there was a reasa, a defect that was found in the animal, as opposed to Haka Sakin is sorry but Behema Yisrael. As opposed to here, the animal, our case with the knife, the animal's fine. There's no defect in the animal. The knife had a defect. And Rav Chisda holds, in that case, you can assume the animal is 100% kosher. Okay. Vehilchasa kivase de Rav Huna. The halacha is like Rav Huna that a nicked knife is no good because you assume that it was nicked by the skin, thick skin. Yes. There you go, thick skin. So vehilchasa kivase de Rav Huna. Vehilchasa kivase de Rav Huna. Kishalo shiber ba etzem. So the halacha is like Rav Huna when you were not cutting the bones with the knife after the shechita. So now vehilchas kivase de Rav Chisda kishashir ba'etzem. But if after the shechita you were cutting the bones with the knife, and now you found the knife to be nicked, so then the halacha is going to be like Rav Chisda, that it was nicked because after the shechita and not beforehand. So basically we split. Rav Huna himself held you always assume it was nicked by the skin, even if you were cutting the animal afterwards, cutting the bones afterwards, you still assume that it was nicked by the skin. That's what Rav Huna held. Rav Chisda held you always assume it was nicked at the last possible moment, which means you assume that it was nicked by the bone and not by the skin. But in halacha, we're going to make a split. We're going to go like Rav Huna when you were not cutting the bones, and you're going to go like Rav Chisda when you were cutting the bones. But says, hold on, the fact that you do that, Michlal, that implies the Rav Chisda holds, Afal Gav de lo shiber ba'etzem. Since you told me that the halacha is like Rav Huna when you're not cutting the bones after the shechita, that implies that in that case they also have a machlokas. Rav Huna says it was nicked by the skin, and Rav Chisda says that it wasn't. So if that's true, how could that be? The guy does a shechita, does not cut any bones afterwards, and now the knife is nicked. So says Rav Huna, very logically, how did it get nicked? Must have been the thick skin beforehand. Says Rav Chisda, no, it was nicked by something else. Okay, well, what was the something else? So if that's their machlokas, Ella b'mai ifkam. What nicked it? So maybe this, like Charles was saying yesterday, Ema be'etzem de mifarekes ifkam. Maybe it's the bone, the mifarekes. So it doesn't tell me the name of it, but it's the bone that you encounter right afterwards in the neck. So maybe it's the vertebrae. 7 vertebrae. A neck bone. Okay. So Charles wanted to say maybe the vertebrae. So I don't know if it's the vertebrae per se or it's the neck bone. I'm not sure. Is there a neck bone that's not a vertebrae? Probably. Because the vertebrae is the one that holds up. Looked up today. 7 of them, and the top one holds up the skull. But it could be that in the neck area there are other bones. Presumably there are. And that's what the neck bone refers to. So not necessarily the vertebrae, but the neck bone. So that's what Rav Chisda says. That even if there was no cutting bones after slaughtering, but there's still a neck bone and encounters after the pipes, after the esophagus and the windpipe, and you can assume that it was nicked on that, and therefore the shechita will be kosher.
The neck bone is situated behind the trachea and the esophagus.
Right. That's what I meant. Yeah. No, I'm just kidding.
What?
Yeah. Whatever you say is good. So okay. Mm-hmm. Makes sense. So, we also have on our neck. There's definitely things here that are not windpipes. That seems pretty hard, no?
Yeah, must be. Yeah.
So, Have Uvda, there was a story, and what happened? Vitara for Rav Yosef Atleisar Hiyusa. Rav Yosef went and he invalidated 13 of the shchitas because there was no knife checking in between. And after all the 13 slaughterings, then they checked the knife and they saw that it was nicked. So the question is, who does Rav Yosef go like? Kiman. So we say he goes like Rav Huna, the one who says that if it's nicked, it's invalid. Now, the question is, Kiman ki Rav Huna, the afilu bekamaisa, meaning we go like Rav Huna, even in the very first animal that was slaughtered, is that also, do we assume over there, like Rav Huna, that it was nicked by the skin? If that would be true, So then that's a proof to Rav Huna. So says the where maybe we could help out Rav Chisda. Lo, Kirav Chisda. No, the first one that was slaughtered. Yeah. No, we can. Yeah, that's all right.
Someone's looking for a bribe.
We go like Rav Chisda, and really it's because the bone that the animal got nicked. Ulebar mikamaisa. So we can go really like Rav Chisda, who holds that the reason why the knife was nicked was because it was nicked by the bones, except for the very first one, the very first slaughtering. In that case. Come on, we can go like Rav Chisda by the other 12 and say they're kosher, except for the first one. The first one we're still going to invalidate like Rav Huna. Right? Why? Because it sounds like over here there was cutting of the bones. And that's how the knife. We assume that the knife got nicked by the cutting of the bones. However, the very first one that was slaughtered, there was no cutting of the bones before you slaughtered it. It was the first one. So that slaughtering, that there we could assume that it was the skin that nicked it. So you have 13 animals. Sounds like after the first one, the next you start cutting the bones. And then and you didn't check the knife. And after all 13, the knife is nicked. So what do you do? So first we thought it's for sure like Rav Huna. They're all invalid because you assume that it was the skin that nicked it. And therefore, if the skin nicked the first one, then the following 12 are all invalid. We're saying not necessarily. You could say that's like Rav Chisda by the last 12, because maybe it got nicked by the bone, which only happened after the first one was slaughtered. So after that point, the next 12 are going to be good because it was the bone that nicked it. But the very first one, when you first started off, so there we would hold like Rav Huna that it was the skin that nicked it. So we would invalidate the first one and say the next 12 are kosher. So that's one answer. Another answer is La'olam ki Rav Huna. Really, it's like Rav Huna, and that they're all going to be invalid because you can assume that it was nicked by the skin before the slaughtering. If it was like Rav Chisda, Michti, let's see. Mitla Kalinan. So we say, Michti, let's see. Mitla Kalinan. So according to Rav Chisda, how are you going to say? What are you going to say about it? That it got nicked by the bone? But how do you know? It was never checked between animals. So mimai de be'etzem de mefarekes de kamaisa ifkim dilma be'etzem de mefarekes de basraisa ifkim. According to Rav Chisda, that it was the bone that nicked it. Okay, but Rav Yosef invalidated 13 animals. So how do you know that it was the first animal that afterwards it was that bone that nicked it? Maybe it was after the 13th animal, it was the bone that nicked it. In Rav Chisda's world, that you blame the bone for nicking the animal. Which bone? After the first animal, that neck bone got it? Or after the 13th animal? You don't know. So you could say it's like Rav Huna, because according to Rav Chisda, how do you know which animal caused the damage to the knife?
You forgot the same thing with Rav Huna.
According to Rav Huna, you assume that the first animal. You're saying, why don't you say the same for Rav Huna? Why don't you say the same thing for Rav Huna? Why don't you say the same thing for Rav Huna? I mean, it's interesting. In Rav Huna's machmir. So Rav Huna, he's stringent, meaning he says it got nicked at the earliest possible moment, right? So logically, for him, you would go stringently and say it was the first animal. Rav Chisda, who's lenient, that assumed it was nicked at the last possible moment. So maybe now you have a question. Well, when was that? The last moment of the first animal or last moment of the 13th animal? Maybe it's harder in the stringent opinion of Rav Huna to be lenient with the 13th animal. Yeah, but it's a good question. Good question. Amalei Ravacha, Braid the Rabbi Ravashi, says Ravacha, son of Rabbi Ravashi, Rav Kahana, Matrich B'dikusa, Bein Kol Chada V'Chada. Rav Kahana, he needed a inspection between each and every shchita. Okay, so who is that like? We say Kiman Ki Rav Huna. That's like Rav Huna, because between each animal you have to check if the knife was nicked or not, because after the slaughtering, if it's nicked, then according to Rav Huna, that's because it got nicked by the skin. That means that animal is invalid. So between each animal, you have to check the knife, because if you don't, then the animal you just slaughtered with a nicked knife is going to be invalid. So you must check. So, Kiman Ki Rav Huna Ula Mifsal Kamaisa, and therefore you're going to invalidate the first one. Yeah, we said Lo Ki Rav Chisda. That could even be according to Rav Chisda. Now, it could even be according to Rav Chisda. Now, according to Rav Chisda, even though he is lenient, why would you require checking between each animal? Because if you don't check between slaughterings, and then what would happen? The knife might be nicked. So even though your previous animal might be kosher, because you could assume it was the bone that nicked it, which is after the shechita, but if the knife is nicked, what's with the next animals? You're going to be slaughtering with a nicked knife. So you can't do that either. So you have to check to make sure that that the knife is not nicked for your coming up slaughtering. So
you check Rav Chisda for the next animal,
and Rav Huna for the previous. Good.
Yeah.
Oh, good. So Lo Ki Rav Chisda Ulachshure Basraisa, to make sure the next animals. Okay. So if this is true, that's why you're checking. So then so then you have to check even before the slaughtering, not in between slaughterings. Even before the slaughtering, you have to check if it's nicked or not, right? Because if you're worried about it's going to be nicked, then you have to check beforehand. So it says if they go to a chacham, go to a scholar, yeah. So we say on that. Well, 1 second, you don't need a scholar. The Torah in certain matters trusts one witness for isurin. So it's Rashi points out it's by slaughtering. You slaughter and it's kosher. You have to go check it at all. You don't need two witnesses to make sure it's kosher. We need two witnesses to extract money or to kill somebody. But when it comes to prohibitions, is your food kosher or not? You say it's kosher. We believe you. We don't need two witnesses. So Eidach and okay. So Ihachi mi karadamilo. So then originally, if that's true, so then you never really need to go check it by somebody. So Hamar Rabbi Yochanan, you're right. The whole checking you could always do yourself. If you know the difference between a nick knife and a not a nick knife, then we trust you. If you don't know the difference, we probably won't trust you, right? But Hamar Rabbi Yochanan lo amru lahara sakal hakam elo b'nei kvodo shel chacham. You're right. The idea of having the knife checked by a scholar was to honor him, to give him honor that you're checking it by him. Puts him on a certain status, on a pedestal, which is a good thing to do. So I don't want to see any of your knives. Yeah, I'll forego the honor. So okay. Now that's right. So yeah. So now the next from here until the next page, and then the next page continues. There's two things that have come up so far, and we're going to find the source for each one, and two incredibly important things. we see clearly, it's pretty clear from these things, these rules, that the Torah does not want us to remain in doubtful situations. It doesn't mean that you can't think of a doubt where we're going to have to, there's Gemaras that say, until Eliyahu Navi comes, it's a doubt. But when you have a doubt in many cases, you either go with the chazaka, with the previous status, as we saw, or you can go with rov, with the majority. Now, the Gemara points out that happens when you have a conflict with those two, rov wins out. Interesting why, but it wins out. Ruba v'chazaka, ruba adif. So if chazaka tells you one way, rov tells you a different way, you go with the rov. But now we're going to find out what's the reason for the chazaka. What's the source for the chazaka? So, minaha milsa, the Amar Rabbanan, uki milsa achazake. So what's the source that a chazaka, that you're going to establish the matter on its previous status? Amar Bishmol bar Nachmani, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Meaning, the idea might not be such a novel idea, but the fact that you could rely on it in halacha is it needs a source. You have a doubt, and all of a sudden you go to its previous status and allow things to have huge ramifications. So, Amar Rav Shmuel bar Nachmani, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Amar Kra. The Kohen comes out of a house that he just checked to see if it has leprosy or not, has tzaras. So it says, "V'yatza kohen min habayis al pesach habayis." It scares habayis shivas yamim. So okay, he walked in, he saw tzaras there. It was spreading, and he walks out of the house and says, "This house is a house of tzaras." Okay, so you got to move out for a week. So it says, "Hold on." The dilma, maybe as he was exiting, the tzaras shrunk. He saw, but maybe a little smaller. How can you assume that when you saw it, it remained that way? Maybe you have to make sure, put a camera on it or something. V'dilma adinafik v'asa batzar le'shiura. It got less than, I think what we said earlier, the size of a gris, of a bean, a lentil bean, that maybe got less. Elalav mishum da'amrinan uki achazake. It must be that last time you checked, it was a certain size. You can assume it remained that size. You don't have to assume every time, oh no, maybe it got smaller. So, yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, it's just interesting. I don't know what the answer is, but food for thought. There's Tosas asks, how do you know that you go after chazaka? Maybe you just have here that you have a doubt, and in a doubtful situation, you have to go stringent. So maybe you don't see from here that it's definitely going to be invalid. Maybe you have to be stringent because it's a doubt in a biblical situation. Okay, food for thought. Either way, so elalav mishum the uki achazake. So first proof that we say we can assume that it remained in a status. You've been to the Kollel many times by the Western Wall, or sometimes some people walk away from it with their back to the wall, and some people walk looking at the wall, walking backwards. So who says this guy walked the normal way out? Maybe he walked backwards, and as he walked backwards, he's looking at the tzaras, and he sees it, and therefore you have no proof. Yeah. So, Amalei Abaye, I got two answers for you. Shtei chus there. First of all, chada diyitzia, when the Torah says he exits, exit means a normal exiting, with your back to where you are and going out. It does not mean that, and we'll bring a proof for it. Well, we'll see. Chada diyitzia, derech achorav lo shmei yitzia. Walking backwards is not called exiting. Presumably, because that's not the normal way to exit. So that's one. Number two is the ode. Achore deles Michael Meimar. That's great if the tzaras was in front of you. You're walking out. So if you're walking out of this building, you're walking with your back out, and the tzaras is, I don't know, on top of the Aron Kodesh. But if the tzaras is behind the door, so walking out backwards is not going to help you. So you still have to rely on what you saw last. Even if you're walking out backwards, it's not going to help you, because if it's at a place like behind the door where you can't see it, even walking backwards, you still have to rely on the chazaka. So that's the other question. Michael Meimar. So maybe you'll tell me v'chitema de pasach bei kivasa. So maybe you'll tell me that there was like a window in the door, so you could see. So you could always see where it is. So maybe you'll tell me that that's the case. V'chitema de pasach bei kivasa. that there was the window in the door, and you looked in from there. But says v'hatnan bais afal ein poskin bo chalonos. By a dark house, we don't open up the windows. Liros es nigo. We don't open up the windows to see if there's tzaras there. Better remain ignorant. Don't look at it. Don't look. Don't tell. So therefore, so basically, a house that you have to have windows to see the tzaras is exempt from tzaras. So too here. So don't assume that there's a window there and you're looking through the window. That's not what we do. So that's one. Now, that which Abai said, exiting means normal exiting with your back to the building, not the other way around. Amarle Rava, the Kamers Yitzia, Derech Achor Loshme Yitzia. I'll prove to you, I'll find you a case where somebody exits the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, exits the Holy of Holies, facing the Aron Kodesh. He's walking out looking at the Aron Kodesh, walking backwards, and what does the Torah call that? Yitzia, exiting. So you see that exiting could be walking backwards. So Kohen Gadol Yom Kippurim Yochiach B'Chseba Yitzia. It says Yitzia V'Tanan Yatsa Ubalo Derech Knisaso. He was Yatsa. He was exiting, but he was exiting the way that he entered, meaning looking at the Aron Kodesh. And that which you said that we don't really look at windows, put in windows. Any house, I have to go through the window to see the tzaras. We don't view it as a house of tzaras. That's also only in a certain situation. But the Kamers buys up in post chalonos. There was this nigo is chazik. That which you don't look at the windows when it was never established. If it was never established and it's a dark house and you can't see inside, so you don't open up the window to see. But if it's a house like this case where the Kohen walked in, saw the tzaras, said it's impure, in that kind of place, there you could look through the window and establish it, continue to establish it as the house of tzaras. Okay. That's that. Tanya, so our proof right now could remain intact that the source of chazaka is the house where the Kohen leaves and can assume that it was the same size of tzaras when he last checked it to when he exited. Tanya Deloker Akabar Yaakov. So we're going to bring a brisa, not like Rav Akabar Yaakov, who said that that I don't know, it's a little bit difficult. The words seem to imply that Rav Akabar Yaakov doesn't hold of a chazaka, because he said the case is the Kohen walked backwards. Why'd you say he walked backwards? Oh, because you don't hold of chazaka. Now, it's a little bit hard to imagine that he doesn't hold of the entire idea of chazaka. Because the idea of chazaka comes up everywhere. It's hard to imagine that. So, but maybe this kind of chazaka is different. I'm not sure. But the Gemara is now saying that this Rav Acha that said you have to walk backwards. So, I spilled. Good. So, the last possible shake was me. So you could assume that I spilled. If you didn't see who spilled, you could assume it was me. Go after chazaka. So,
then you assume everybody's dead. Until you see them alive.
Yeah. I have in my head that they talk about this opinion. How could it be someone doesn't hold chazaka at all? So, and I have to look into it more. But either way, we're saying the fact that he established that the guy walked backwards shows you that obviously if you were to walk forwards, you can't rely on the chazaka. So now we're going to bring a question on that opinion. So, v'yatza kohen abayis. So we say the Kohen left the house. Yachol yelech letoch beiso v'yazgir. So you would think that he went into the house and established it to be a quarantined house. You have to stay away. Talmud Lomar el Pesach Habayis. You can go to the entrance to the house. You don't have to go inside. If you're by the entrance of the house, you can stand under the lintel, v'yazgir, and do it from there. Talmud Lomar min habayis. So which one is it? Achiyata min habayis kula. So can you establish it to be invalid when you left the house, or only when you're in the house? Ha-ketzad. How do you reconcile this seeming contradiction? Omen b'tzad mashkov, umazgir. You're standing on the side of the lintel, and you're establishing the house to be invalid. Uminayin she'im halach l'toch beis v'hizgir, osh amun b'toch habayis v'hizgir, shehizgiro muzgar. How you know that if you're actually in the house, you're standing in the house and you establish it to be a quarantined house. Either you walk into the house or you're standing inside the house, that you could do that. It says that you were the word v'hizgir, you quarantined it. Either way you did it, whether you're under the lintel, whether you're in the house, it's going to be considered quarantined. So now, what's the question on Ravacha? That here we see that even a guy who walked in a house and now he's gone, he walked out of the house, he could still establish the house to be quarantined. You don't have to be constantly looking at it. Even if you walked out of the house, that's fine to establish as a quarantined house because you go after Chazaka. So that's not like Rav Acha bar Yaakov. Says Rav Acha bar Yaakov is going to answer you that next page, Kigon, the Kaimi Dara the Gavri. He's going to have to establish the price in a case where it's like a long game of broken telephone, except it's not broken. You have a bunch of people in line, and one tells the next guy, quarantine, 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 quarantine. Oh, gets the coin, quarantined. So the person is there looking at the house. He tells the next guy leprosy, next guy leprosy. So that's the case. So it's not that he left it and trusts the chazaka. He trusts the testimony of the people that are a single file outside the line. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. You go into Kaimi Dara the Gavri the Amri Kidikai Kai. Okay. Now the Gemara jumps to Rashi says once we're talking about chazaka, we'll talk about rove and find the source for going after the majority. Menaha Milsa, what's your source? Amar Rabbanan, that the rabbis say, Zil Basaruba, that you go after the majority. Says the Gemara, what do you mean? Hold on, what's a source? What's a pasuk in the Torah? You have a court, and you need 3 judges. 2 say guilty, 1 says innocent. So you go after the 2. Now, Chaim points out that really 2 kinds of majorities. He has a question. The Torah says you need 3 judges. So you have 2-1 vote. So you see you go after the 2. The Torah says 3, not 2. How does that work? You need 23 judges. So you have 21 against 2. So, okay, that works. How does that work? You need 71 judges. So you have 69 against 2. So it works. How does it work? If you need, the Torah says 3, you have 2. So he says that's the power of the rove. The majority means that the 1 is subsumed in the 2. You have 3. That's the novelty of the verse. Not just go after majority, but you can view it. You can view it that there are 3 people. Just like you have 2 pieces of meat, 3 pieces of meat. 2 are kosher, 1's not kosher. Halacha is the 3rd piece of meat, 100% kosher. They all become kosher, stamped kosher. You can either, maybe it's not kosher. No, majority tells you they're all kosher. So says the Gemara, okay, that verse, but there's 2 kinds of majorities. One that's in front of your eyes that you're looking at, right? The classic case of the 10 stores, 9 kosher, 1 not. You find a piece of meat. What do you do? But then there's a majority that's not in front of you. I don't know how to call it. A statistical majority, something which is not. How many kids are? It's not right in front of you. That's so that's called. There's a ruba. Says the Gemara. This is a ruba the Isa kaman. This is a row that's in front of you. Kigon, for example, Tesha chanuyos. You have 9 stores that are kosher. 1's not kosher. You find a piece of meat. Those are in front of you. The Sanhedrin and a Sanhedrin. It's right in front of you. You have a majority of people. They're right in front of you. So that lo kami bailan. That we have a verse. That we know already. Ki kami bailan. Where's our question? Is aruba de lesakaman, and we touched on this a little bit earlier. Is kigon kata miktana, that you have a young child or a young boy or girl that now fell into a yibum situation. There's a minority of boys that end up having reproductive issues, and there are a minority of girls that end up also becoming an islandess, which is a lady with physical features that can't reproduce. And if you can't reproduce, so you're excluded from the section of yibum. Part of yibum is you have to be at least potentially able to establish children in your brother's name, in the brother's name. So we had earlier of Meir and Rabbi Gamliel worried about the minority. This is the case. But here, that's a case where it's not in front of you. Minority of kids have reproductive issues. Minority of boys. The majority don't. So you can go after the majority, not that all of them are in front of you, after the majority and establish it and allow the katan or the ktana to do yibum. So such a case, what's the source? Rav Elazar, Siman, Zman, Shvach. So 3 cases, let's see. So Asya, Mi, Reisha, Shel, Ola. Let's learn from the head of a fully consumed offering. The Amar Kra, as the verse says, V'nasata osa linsacheha. Osa linisachim below nisachecha linisachim. So you cut the pieces of the ola, but you don't cut the pieces of the pieces. So you'll cut the head off, put the rest of the body on the altar, but you can't cut the head itself. So you can cut them into basic pieces, but not pieces of pieces. So you have no right to cut open the head. And therefore, you could never check the brain, and therefore, you're never going to know, was the brain damaged or not? And if it was damaged, it'll be a treifa, but you don't know. So what do you say? It says, shouldn't you be worried that the brain got damaged? Most brains of the animals don't have a hole or a puncture, and therefore you can assume that this animal is like the majority. A majority of their brains, as opposed to parts of society, no, majority of the brains of the Ola are intact. Yeah, so therefore you can assume that way. So says the Gemara, hold on, that's not a good proof. Why? Mimai Dilma de Polile u Badakle. Maybe it's split open. Maybe you didn't, you cut it open when it wasn't separated from the animal. When you cut it off the animal, you can only cut that off the animal. Then you can't go and cut it. But if it's not yet cut off the animal, so maybe you can cut it open then. Is that what it says? While it was attached, right? And
if you object to head may not be open, but only if the ola is the pieces.
That's the next line. And maybe you'll say, one second, how did the Kohen split open the head? Isn't it a problem of you can cut it into pieces, but not pieces into pieces? So on that, the Gemara says, that's what I said. That halach is only when you cut the head off fully. Then you can't go and cut the head into pieces. But as long as it's there attached to the animal, then there's going to be no problem. We ran out of time. Okay.